let's talk about quilted jackets. I literally could not be more obsessed with this quilted jacket trend that's going on right now. I think that they are so cute and absolutely beautiful. Look at some of these I found on Pinterest. Now, I'm just gonna give credit where credit is due. These are from Lady Lancaster. She does a gorgeous job refurbishing these beautiful Amish quilts from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I could not be more obsessed. The only problem is that they're a little bit pricey. Your girl just doesn't have that kind of change to throw out one of the most beautiful jackets ever. So what we're gonna do is try to make our own. Ooh.
I went to this fabulous thrift/antique store near where I live and found a whole pile of super cheap old quilts. Some of them were a bit too damaged, like this beautiful velvet one. So sad. But I did find some others and ended up coming home with a whole box of quilts for about 15 bucks. You know that I live in a tiny house, so my goal is to make something out of each of these quilts, and then I'll most likely give some of these things away, but for now my goal is to create at least one fabulous quilt coat from my findings. Let me show you what I ended up taking home with me. I just kind of threw everything out on my bed because, again, space is a thing here, but here is what I found that I'm going to try to make into something. First of all, this cool old Afghan. This isn't a quilt, obviously, but I just thought it was so beautiful. I thought I'd try to make a wrap out of it. And then we've got this little baby quilt. I think it's so cute. Don't love the lining on it, but I think that this is so pretty. I love this quilting pattern and the colors on it. There's definitely not enough of this to make a whole jacket, so we're gonna get creative, and I'm not sure what we're gonna do with this yet. Maybe like a cute little top or something. I found this. This is a quilt top, so it's actually not even quilted. See, so if I open up the back, you can kind of see inside. This is actually kind of perfect because I love the colors on it. Again, I love the style of this quilt, but I can do my own batting and my own lining, which is ideal. And then I also found this beautiful old toile that isn't going to be a quilt jacket, but it was too beautiful to pass up. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. This guy I picked up, and I don't know, honestly, I might be regretting it just a little bit. It's an unfinished quilt. The inside, I'm gonna be honest with you, I really don't like it. But this side I thought was really gorgeous. And I thought that would be cute, even though it's all just one fabric. It still has a cute little quilty thing to it going on. And I thought it might be a cute little jacket. And then lastly here, I cannot believe I found this big old guy. It's big, but look how gorgeous that is. This is really the classic quilt thing that I was looking for. Here's the thing with this quilt though. This is one side, and then look at the lining. Oh, I kind of love both sides of it. They're both so gorgeous. So I don't know.
So I'm thinking that I may want to try and separate the two sides out of this big quilt right here and make two like longer kimono type jackets out of them. If I can separate them and it's not too hard. Obviously it looks like the way it's quilted is that it's not like sewn together, but it just has those little yarn tufts that holds the two sides together. You know what I'm talking about? So hopefully I can separate those two out and get two jackets out of it, because I don't want just one side to be the lining. I love both sides of it so much, and I think there's two totally different looks that could make something really cool. So here we go. Next stop is design, figuring out what I'm actually going to do, how this is going to turn out, what my pattern pieces are going to look like, and so forth. So let's get to that.
I do like to plan out my designs with just a quick sketch. This gives me a chance to really think through the pattern pieces that I'll need for my project and have a distinct vision of what I want to do. Now, this project ended up looking a little bit different. I went for a classic kimono style with no collar as I had originally planned, as you can see in this sketch. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. The first step was to clear the coffee table out of the living room, aka my sewing room and everything else room, then lay out the big quilt and cut off all of the little tufts holding those two sides together. It didn't take too long to cut off all of those little tufts, and then once I did so, I separated the two sides of the quilt, threw away the batting that was in the center because it was gross and old, and then washed the two sides of the quilt twice.
It's a new day. Last night I finished cutting it out, so I want to show you exactly what I did for cutting out because I'm ready to basically just sew the whole thing up together. I think this is going to be a pretty quick project at the end of the day. Okay, so it basically takes up my entire living room floor here, but you can see I basically just cut that main quilt down a little bit, cut a big hole in the center so that we have an obvious front and neck hole. And then I'll also show you, this is pieced together. I had to kind of cut off a strip of quilt in order to make these big, wide kimono type sleeves on there. And I just tacked them to either side where the sleeves are gonna go. I had enough fabric to make a lining as well. So, blah, that's my lining. Same exact shape, same exact look to it. It's just gonna be the other side. Now, because I used an old quilt and ended up taking that quilt apart a little bit, I have to actually put new batting in because the old batting was just really gross and needed to be replaced anyway. So I will say this, if you are using a nicer quality quilt than the one I'm using, then the next step is not necessary. You can just cut this quilt up in the shape that I've got it here already without having to do the lining and everything, and then seam bind around the edges and put the whole thing together. So you can skip over the next little bit here, but I have to go back now and put batting in and kind of reshape the quilt like it used to look, essentially, with that fresh new batting.
Because this kimono style doesn't require any shoulder seams, all I did here is fold this whole thing in half with right sides together, pin down the underarm and the side seams, and stitch along the edges that I pinned. Here you see me doing this to the lining of my quilt coat. I repeated this process with the outside of the coat and with the inner batting as well. And ta-da! This is what the two sides looked like before I sewed them together. Next step was to pin the lining to the outside at the neckline with right sides together, and then of course sew it all down. One of the biggest tips I think I can offer for a project like this is to use a quilting foot on your machine. This is actually the first time I've ever used mine, and it was so helpful. I honestly might just use it for everything now. Okay, I've got the lining sewed in here along the neckline and the sleeves, so all I have left to do is some top stitching around the sleeve hem and the neckline here. I gotta top stitch this so it kind of stays together. And then I still have a raw edge, so I gotta figure out what to do with that. But then I'm basically done. Oh, I also decided to put some cute little pockets on here. So I just took some lining, leftover lining I had, and kind of made this little pocket bag out of it. And my plan is to put some binding around the top of that pocket and then just honestly tack it on so we have a little pocket there. I'm so close to being done. I'm honestly amazed at how fast this project has gone. I've probably been working on it for 3 hours so far, like all together. And this makes me really hopeful that I can maybe knock out another one this weekend. Oh, we'll see. Okay, I spoke too soon. I ended up doing the top stitching by hand, which took forever, and then the seam binding around the bottom also took forever. Oh well, but here's the finished product. Oh, and guess what? I did have time to make a second one with the other half of the quilt. This one's a bit shorter, but just as cozy. Let me know in the comments which one you like best. This ended up being one of my favorite sewing projects ever. These quilt coats are 1000% cozy and so easy to do. If you end up making a quilt coat, hashtag sew with Emily on Insta so that I can see. Happy sewing!